Welcome. In some denominations, you'd make a trip to the pastor's study for answers to the really tough questions. Well, let's see what we can do here. Hello. Merry meet and blessed be, and welcome to another session in a very different pastor's study. I'm Aidan Odinson, High Priest of the Temple of Gaia, or Bishop Cal Lippitt of the Universal Episcopal Church, all depending on how you got here. And, you know, there are two things besides regular worship services of whatever kind. There are two kinds of things that clergy do that seem to be specially thought of as things that clergy do. Weddings and funerals. No matter what denomination or whatever that you are, even people who don't have a spiritual path will come looking for a clergy of some sort when they're talking about time for a wedding or a funeral. The big difference that I see from where I sit or stand, as I usually do at those events, is that both of them are serious, but at least at a wedding there's a little leeway. And if you make a mistake, somebody might chuckle a little, and if you really make a big blooper, address the bride by a wrong name or something like that, hey, they might invite you to their 20th anniversary celebration and have a good laugh over it and buy you a drink over it. Hey. At a funeral, there's no excuse. Basically, there's no excuse for making a mistake, especially a basic one. Two that I can think of especially. Getting names right. That's one. And the other one is details. Getting names right, that's one. First funeral that I ever attended was Grandpa Hansen. Oh, I loved that guy. And to this day, he's still an inspiration. I remember watching color movies that he made in the days when people weren't making very many color home movies. And guess what I'm doing? Yeah, you could say that he was my inspiration in many things. Ham radio, computers. He was big on technology and that sort of thing. And then suddenly he died. And the minister, who was somebody I had never met before, I was 9 years old at the time, and I'd been regularly to the Duluth for all of my life, and here's this guy that got hired out of the blue as far as I knew, and as he went down the list of survivors, he mentioned my mother. And he called her Mrs. Dolores Lippitt. Excuse me, folks, but the pronunciation is Lippitt. And I've had people call looking for somebody by the name of Lippitt, And I tell them there is nobody by that name that lives here. And details, especially details from the person's life. These are the things that people want to remember. And there are certain things that they're going to remember, and you don't want to insult their memories. By insulting their memories, I'm talking about getting details wrong, or using the wrong details. Case in point, if a man or woman was a Marine, they were a Marine, not a soldier. And if you call a Marine a soldier, you'll see how quickly they will correct you. If you are talking about somebody who was a naval officer, the person was a naval officer, not a sailor. And for heaven's sake, if a person worked for a particular company and you're mentioning it, make sure you mention the company correctly. Preferably, and this can sometimes take a little chasing of details, the name of the company as it was known when the person worked there. That might be important to some people. If a person worked for Marshall Wells before it became part of Coast to Coast Stores, or if they worked for Coast to Coast Stores before it became part of Service Star or whatever it's called now. These are important details. And these are the things, the memories that people have, and they need to be honored. The funeral that we went to this past weekend had all of those details correctly covered. And some others too. Nothing worse than somebody who comes to a funeral with an agenda or bringing their own little drama. Yeah, that's happened. And that's one of the reasons why I consider it important for the people who work for the funeral home or the place where the funeral is going to be somehow reasonably distinctively dressed, at the very least all wearing some sort of appropriate suits or the equivalent female attire. And clergy need to be clergy. And that means if you've looked for an excuse for putting on a robe, there it is. And if you're at the kind of funeral where a lot of people are in robes, adding something extra to your robe if you're the officiant is not a bad idea. Let people know who's in charge and take charge. Above all else, remember this. Funerals are for the living. In some cases, it may have been a long, lingering illness. In some cases, it may have been just old age. My dad was 92. I know that it hit hard and hurt. I also know that none of us are immortal. Or it could be like the one we just attended. Somebody who went to sleep one night and didn't wake up the next morning. And that's all. No sign of anything. No car crash either. Just went to sleep one night and didn't get up the next morning, that's all. But funerals are for the living. Funerals give people the last chance to say goodbye. And they also serve to the more immediate people as a buffer, a cushion. Yeah, a cushion. To try to keep the blow from being as hard as it might be. Yeah. Think about it. Somebody's there and suddenly somebody's never going to be there again. And you bring together family and friends and have a time of remembrance. Yeah. It's a cushion. Not just a time to say goodbye, but a cushion. And that's what funerals do for people. Anyway, that's my thoughts on funerals after, excuse me, after having officiated at yet another one this weekend. And I wanted to share them with you because it's one of those things that we're all going to deal with one of these days. Well, at least we don't have to deal with our own. Somebody else will have to deal with that. But we have to deal with one for everybody we know, don't we? And so, I'll see you next week. Merry meet, and merry meet again. Blessed be. This has been a presentation of the Wise Ones Net. Merry part and blessed be.